National Park, we'll find the densest concentration of natural rock arches in the entire world. There are over 2,000 documented arches in the park, and new ones forming as we speak, by the same geologic forces that created the ones that we'll see today. I'm betting you're curious how these arches formed. Well, it is a bit complicated, but I'm going to do my best to explain. Our story begins a mere 300 million years ago, where this area was part of a huge inland sea. When those seas evaporated and refilled many times, they left behind a lot of salt. In fact, in some places, the salt was several thousand feet deep. Over the next several million years, sand and other residue left behind by the floods, wind, and streams formed a thick blanket over that salt bed. All of that debris was compressed into a thick layer of rock. As you can imagine, the rock was way too heavy for the unstable salt bed underneath. Under enormous pressure, the salt became fluid and would shift and move sometimes, forcing a weaker rock layer upwards to form something like a rock dome. Then, about 65 million years ago, tectonic forces wrinkled and folded the buried sandstone, creating fractures in the rock that were susceptible to the powers of erosion and were eventually carved into freestanding fins of rock, just like the penguins that we saw. In many fins, a weaker rock sits beneath stronger rock, so the weaker rock weathered first, dropping away and creating the distinctive natural arches that we'll see in the park. I know it's a lot to take in, and I'll be sure to point out some formations in the park that help us understand this arch building process a little bit better. Plus, the visitor center has some great exhibits and a video that helps illustrate this process, just in case you didn't stop in on your way into the park. Parking area. This way you don't have to walk back. The parking area for Park Avenue is coming up on our left, and we'll want to turn in here because I still have a little bit of explaining, but let's pull in, okay? Some things we ought to keep in mind. If we do plan on going for a walk, we need to protect ourselves from the sun and heat, and always have some water with us. Also, please stay on the trail, okay? The arid conditions here make it really hard for anything. Translated to the Elk Mountains, but it was changed to La Salle Mountains, a name used by the early Spaniards. The Spanish explorers couldn't believe that the white caps on the mountains could be snow. In a land so hot it had to be salt, right? So they called them Sierra de la... Spoiler, they're not salt. Next is the courthouse viewpoint coming up on our right, and if we dropped off hikers at Park Avenue, this is where we'll pick them up. It's a worthwhile stop to take in views of the many sandstone formations that surround the parking area, including the Organ and the Tower of Babel. We can also see a small arch in the rock wall here called Baby Arch. Aw, isn't that cute? We really should turn in. Interestingly, Sheeprock used to be part of a double arch that collapsed over time and was connected to the main wall to its left. Erosion and host of rock layers that erode at different rates. The top rock is made of hard entrada sandstone, and it sits on softer, muddy sandstone, otherwise known as Dewey Bridge mudstone. The bottom erodes faster than the top, and for a period of its life it becomes a hoodoo. So it's not actually balanced at all, is it? But it does offer us a nice example from the road. You're going to want to get out of the car and check this formation out up close. Maybe you'll recognize this place from a popular movie, the opening scene from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. This otherworldly landscape before us has been used as the backdrop in many other recognizable films. Thelma and Louise, City Slickers 2, and The Hulk. Filmmakers wanting to shoot in the park have to follow the same rules as any visitors. Not to mention, they have to apply for special permits requiring them to follow strict procedures to ensure that the fragile desert landscape is not damaged while on location. We ought to be seeing that view now. If you look at the largest alcove in the back, this is a pre-arch that will eventually form into a true arch if it continues to erode. All right, our next stop after this will be the windows. Landscape was formed. Remember the moving salt that we talked about earlier? Here, salt deposits moved up and piled around the ridges of this valley. Dome rocks started to erode, and the salt almost became there is a lot to see and do here. Many of the park's most famous arches are found here, including Landscape Arch. That's the longest arch in the U.S. For quite some time, Landscape Arch was considered the longest, largest, biggest arch in the world. But more recently, some humongous natural arches in the rugged area of southeastern China were discovered. They have even larger spans than Landscape Arch. As we make our way around the large loop here, we'll find the turnoff for the campground, several picnic spots, and from a sightseeing perspective, the Devil's Garden Trailhead. The first mile of the trail is pretty well maintained and pretty easy for walking. On this stretch of trail, we'll see Pine Tree Arch, Tunnel Arch, and Landscape Arch. Now, if we decide to go further and see more, the trail becomes a bit more challenging and passes over rocky terrain with steep slopes and some narrow drop-offs. Now, that said, the sights are amazing, but if you do decide to venture further than Landscape Arch, we'll want to make sure to be prepared with proper footwear, plenty of water, and certainly enough daylight. I say if we're capable of 2 miles, we should walk out to Landscape Arch here. Who knows, this might be your only chance to see it. Pieces of Landscape Arch have broken off during the past few centuries, some chunks the size of cars. And there are experts who think that Landscape Arch is at the end of its life cycle and soon will be just a pile of rocks. Now others think that Landscape Arch has just shed some pounds and that the new balanced arch might be around for a few hundred more years after all. Either way, Landscape Arch is an amazing jays and pinyon mice that live here in the pinyon juniper woodland. Rodents find hiding spots in the trees and rocks, and they provide food for bobcats, mountain lions, and ringtail cats. Think I'm pulling your leg because you didn't see much wildlife in the park today? Well, these animals are mostly active at twilight or dawn. Yeah, we're all trying to avoid the hot temperatures at daytime, aren't we? If you looked closely, you may have noticed their tracks, along with other signs of animal activity on the trails. They may look at you, actually help save their lives. Few more people I ought to mention who left their mark on Arches National Park. Of course, there's a rich human history at Arches that spans over 10,000 years. Countless generations of Native Americans crossed this sandstone landscape before the first ever white European explorers set foot here. The first visitors were hunter-gatherers that migrated into the area at the end of the Ice Age. They found microcrystalline quartz perfect for making stone tools. And roughly 2,000 years ago came the ancient Puebloan people. They left behind plenty of drawings on the rocks, but began leaving the region about 700 years ago due to an extreme drought. They were followed by the nomadic Ute and Paiute peoples, who were here to meet the first Europeans in 1776. They were the ones to leave their mark on the petroglyph panel near Wolf Ranch. The drawings there show people on horseback. Horses were introduced by the Spanish, who were the first to explore the Southwest, looking for travel routes across the desert to their California missions. That route today is called the Old Spanish Trail, and roughly follows 191 through Moab. The first recorded visitor to Arches was a French fur trapper named Denis Julien, who chiseled his name in the rock on June 9, 1844. After that, the Mormon Church established a mission of his journeys along with Doc Williams, Moab's first doctor, and together they teamed up to see the creation of one of the country's most popular national parks. Alexander Ringhofer, a prospector, wrote to the Rio Grande Western Railroad in 1923 in an effort to publicize the area and gain support for creating a national park. Ringhofer convinced railroad executives to try and attract more rail passengers to the formations. Those executives were impressed, and the campaign began. On April 12, 1929, President Herbert Hoover signed the Presidential Proclamation number 1875, reserving 1,920 acres in the Windows and 2,600 acres in the Devil's Garden to establish Arches National Monument. And state forests, Arches benefited from the hard work of the Civilian Conservation Corps, or CCC. In March 1940, a CCC camp was established to help develop Arches National Monument. The enrollees were unmarried, unemployed young men aged 18 to 25 who needed work during the Depression. The CCC camp was closed in March 1942 when the U.S. entered World War II, but they managed to complete an impressive amount of work in just a couple of years. They improved the entrance road, built drainage culverts, constructed the headquarters buildings, and started working on a new scenic park road. The red sandstone building by the visitor center is a memory of their hard work. It's through the work of Bates Wilson that the monument became a national park. Wilson became the superintendent in 1949, and he is responsible for most of what makes this park the world famous, not just here, but in any of the desert environments in the Southwest. This is a very fragile ecosystem, and it needs to be treated with care. Earlier in our drive, we talked about potholes that contribute to forming arches, but potholes can be found anywhere. These potholes, or ephemeral pools, collect rainwater and wind-blown sediments and form tiny ecosystems where a fascinating collection of plants and animals has adapted to life in the desert. These potholes can be a few millimeters or even up to several feet deep, and all of them can contain microscopic invertebrates. In fact, if you look up close at a water-filled pothole, you may even see fairy shrimp, red-spotted toads, tadpoles, or some mosquito larvae. These creatures are really in a race against time, sometimes living a short life cycle as those potholes dry out. Many species of shrimp that live in this water must mature quickly and lay eggs. So, it is important not to disturb the pools. Even our natural skin secretions from a finger just earlier in our tour. But it's so important to desert plant communities, it deserves a more thorough mention, okay? You most likely noticed the crusty, bumpy black growths on the soil near the trails. This is biological soil crust, also known as cryptobiotic soil, or just crypto for short. Yeah, it was named that a long time ago, so hit the road, Bitcoin. Without it, much of the desert soil would just blow away. Biocrust acts like a kind of glue to help stabilize the soil and prevent erosion from the high winds and intense rain common in this area. The biocrust is also nutrient-rich and retains water, which of course helps plant life survive in this arid desert environment. Biological soil crust is fragile as can be. In fact, it can take decades to grow, and just one footstep, it can destroy it. Remember, when the park managers make rules, their main priorities are to keep we visitors safe, but also to preserve the environment in as natural a state as possible. The NPS isn't about trying to take away any having fun in the parks. So, we want to all say thank you for being a good visitor and following the park recommendations. It was first published in 1968, but it's now recognized as one of the most important works in nature and environmentalism ever written. Let's just say that quite a few people, after reading this book, have been inspired to divest most of their world belongings, pack up their car, and beeline it straight to the Utah desert. Anyway, Desert Solitaire is a series of musings about Abby's time as a park ranger at Arches National Park in the late 1950s. In the book, he delves into vivid description of the Canyon Dam, which blocks the Colorado River and created Lake Powell. Well, that book inspired an entire generation of environmentalists, and although we don't in any way condone eco-sabotage, it's quite an entertaining story and provides an interesting viewpoint about the issues facing canyon country then and now. Moab's Red Rock scenery not only inspires outdoor recreationists and sightseers, see on that side of the highway is much older than the layers we're driving on now, on this side of the fault. In fact, the layer we look across to used to sit on top of where we are now. About 240 million years ago, intense underground pressure caused several miles of the Earth's crust to lift and buckle along this fracture line. Now, nobody needs to worry about major earthquakes through here now. Geologists say the risk is low since most of the fault's activity occurred well in the past. But it's pretty interesting, isn't it? Looking just barely a mile across the valley is like looking many millions of years further into the past. Friends, this is our final descent as we leave Arches National Park. I sure hope you enjoyed the time we spent together in the park and that it created some fantastic memories for years to come. If we happen to skip the visitor center on our way into the park, maybe we want to stop on